Hello everyone, I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, but before that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? I'm a big hiker. I was doing some hiking in Utah during a cross-country trip I was taking after breaking up with who I thought was going to be my fiancé. Long story short, caught her messing around with one of my closest friends. Total betrayal on both sides. I was 31. Utah was actually one of the states I was most excited about passing through. There are some great forests out there that I think every hiker would dream of exploring. I had picked the Uinta-Wasatch Cache National Forest as my Utah destination because I had heard a lot of great things about it. One of its biggest upsides for me was that it had a lot of secluded areas that I could easily access. I prefer hiking alone, so bustling hiking trails swarming with people aren't really my thing. I picked an unnamed area of the forest and drove my car as far down this narrow access road as I could. I parked, stepped out of my car, and took in my surroundings. I geared up and checked my phone. No service, just the way I like it. I made a mental note of my starting point and began the trek. I know hiking alone in uncharted territory is dangerous, but I don't think I have as much fun following a designated route. I always download the digital map of whatever location I'm planning to explore. A lot of people don't realize that your phone's GPS still functions without service. I know what you're probably thinking. Now, didn't get lost. I wish I could tell you that's what this story is about. The reality of what happened to me is something I'm still trying to wrap my head around. My destination was a lookout point. The summit of the mountain was maybe 3 or 4 miles away. The terrain was pretty difficult, so I was only clearing about 1.5 miles an hour. About an hour into my hike, it began raining. Although it was light, I refused to continue. Hiking in the rain is a massive pet peeve of mine. Annoyed, I turned around and began retracing my steps. Eventually, I spotted my car in the distance, and I was relieved that this failed outing would soon be over. I reached my vehicle and was met with a horrifying sight. All 4 tires were slashed. I felt the fear start to set in. There wasn't a chance in the world that all 4 tires had been coincidentally punctured. This had been deliberate. I whipped my head around, scanning the forest in every direction. Nothing. I listened as carefully as I could. Anything I might have picked up on was drowned out by the patter of raindrops on leaves and brush. I weighed my options. Without service, I was basically screwed. I'd need to get service so I could call for assistance, but as far as I remembered, I had lost service over 20 miles down the access road. Walking back to civilization seemed like a grueling option. I needed to find high ground. Luckily, the destination I had originally sought out was just that. Had to chance it. I didn't feel safe walking 20 miles down the road where I'd basically be out in the open. Without another thought, I turned back towards the woods and began my route once again. I was about halfway to the summit when I picked up on a faint rustling coming from behind me, maybe 40 or so yards away. It would start and stop in tandem with my movement. I didn't want to turn and look. I just picked up the pace, knowing I was probably a faster hiker than whoever or whatever was stalking me. The sun was starting to go down, casting an eerie shadow over the forest. The rain was still falling, and I was starting to get nervous. After putting some distance between myself and whatever was stalking me, cast an inconspicuous glance over my shoulder. I didn't see anything. Someone could have been easily hiding behind any of the countless trees in the forest. Finally, I reached the beach. By some miracle, there actually was service up. Didn't waste a second, not even pausing to admire the view. I told the police exactly where my car was and explained what happened, including my suspicion that I was being stalked. I also told the operator that I had AAA. I hung up, relieved that someone knew where I was. There was still a glaring problem, though. I'd have to navigate back through the forest before it was fully dark, while somehow avoiding whoever was stalking. I couldn't just march in a straight line back through the forest. That was asking for trouble. I thought for a second before concluding that I'd have to try to walk in a semicircle back to my car, hopefully avoiding any kind of trap someone had set. I walked parallel to the cliff for a while, before entering the woods from a different angle. I hadn't bothered to analyze this area of the forest, though, so I pulled up the map on my phone and prayed my navigation skills wouldn't let me down. Things were going well for a while. I hadn't heard a single unusual sound behind or in front of me. I might have spoken too soon, though, because not 30 seconds after having that thought, I heard a twig snap from my left. I turned to look, but didn't see anything, and a few minutes later I heard another sound, this time from directly behind me. My blood ran cold as it dawned on me. There were multiple people out. Picked up the pace again, settling into a light jog. As if things weren't terrifying enough already, I stumbled upon something that brought my panic levels from a 5 to a 10. There was a makeshift campsite, literally tucked away in the woods. There were 12 or so logs sitting in a circle around a campfire. Someone had been here recently. I jogged around it and continued on, casting glances behind me every so often. A few minutes later, I heard something from my right this time. Turned quickly enough just to barely see someone's foot jump behind a tree. That was it for me. My light jog instantly turned into a full-on sprint through the woods. I didn't care how loud I was being. I needed to get out of that forest. As I ran, the sounds around me continued getting louder. It was clear that I was being chased. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. I continued running, afraid to look behind me. At one point, couldn't resist the urge anymore and shot a glance over my shoulder. I counted at least 6 people, all of whom were wearing white, charging toward me. Kept running, knowing my car wasn't far. The next few minutes were the most terrifying moments I've ever experienced in my life. Imagine being overwhelmed with exhaustion while the threat of death looms over you. I couldn't slow down. My life literally depended on it. Finally, I saw my car in the distance. Right behind it was a police officer. I reached his car and keeled over, almost throwing up before he even had a chance to speak. I turned around and those people that had been chasing me were nowhere in sight. The cop told me that he had gone ahead and called AAA, which I was beyond thankful for. I gave him a full police report. What he told me was chilling. Apparently, Utah houses the largest population of Mormons in the country, and it isn't uncommon to encounter woods folk in an unmarked forest. The specific forest I was exploring actually had a very rich history, especially as it pertains to woods cults and religious groups. The cop told me that I had probably stumbled upon one such group, that I was stupid to explore a random part of the woods. In all honesty, what that cop told me all those years ago was probably true. I still can't wrap my head around this, though. If they were mad that I was infringing on their land, why not just tell me that? I don't see why they'd feel the need to stalk and chase me through the woods, especially after slashing my tires. This experience is still something I think about all the time. As I ran, the sounds around me continued getting louder. It was clear that I was being chased. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. I continued running, afraid to look behind me. At one point, I couldn't resist the urge anymore and shot a glance over my shoulder. I counted at least 6 people, all of whom were wearing white and charging toward me. I kept running, knowing my car wasn't far. The next few minutes were the most terrifying moments I've ever experienced in my life. Imagine being overwhelmed with exhaustion while the threat of death looms over you. I couldn't slow down. My life literally depended on it. Finally, I saw my car in the distance, and right behind it was a police officer. I reached his car and keeled over, almost throwing up before he even had a chance to speak. I turned around, and those people that had been chasing me were nowhere in sight. The cop told me that he had gone ahead and called AAA, which I was beyond thankful. I gave him a full police report, and what he told me was chilling. Apparently, Utah houses the largest population of Mormons in the country, and it isn't uncommon to encounter woods folk in unmarked forests. The specific forest I was exploring actually had a very rich history, especially as it pertains to woods cults and religious groups. The cop told me that I had probably stumbled upon one such group, that I was stupid to explore a random part of the woods. In all honesty, what that cop told me all those years ago is probably true. I still can't wrap my head around this, though. If they were mad that I was infringing on their land, why not just tell me that? I don't see why they'd feel the need to stalk and chase me through the woods, especially after slashing my tires. This experience is still something I think about all the time. 5 of us quieted and watched as the dark figure slowly made its way toward the water. We were excited because it seemed like we might have some kind of encounter. We usually welcomed. As the figure neared the water, we noticed they were dragging something. Eventually, we realized what it was. A large black garbage bag appeared to have something heavy inside, judging by how slowly the person was moving. I don't want to make assumptions, but a few bodies had been found in that reservoir over the years, so we quickly assumed the worst. We weren't smiling or talking anymore, just staring quietly at the figure dragging what we assumed was a body toward the water. After reaching the water, the person knelt over the bag for a few minutes. We couldn't tell what they were doing from so far away. We figured it was a good time to leave while they were distracted. Before we could go, Chester spotted something else. 3 more figures emerged from the woods, 2 dragging bags, and the third carrying a kayak over his head. I felt sick. I lived only 10 minutes away from one of the most crime-ridden towns in America, so if this was gang-related, it would have made sense. The first man we noticed got into the kayak, while the others helped load one of the bags onto his lap. He rowed out to the middle of the reservoir, and we watched as the garbage bag disappeared below the surface. He came back to shore and repeated the process twice more. Then, like a scene from a movie, my phone rang. The annoying tune cut through the silence like a razor blade, and I nervously fumbled to mute it fast enough. 4 men froze and turned in our direction. That's when we ran. Just like that, the sanctity of my backyard reservoir was gone forever. Rick glanced over his shoulder and yelled that they were following us. It was the scariest moment of my life. Running through the forest is difficult enough, but with the threat of death looming, was twice as bad. We ran all the way back, cutting across the bank and making our way through the woods to the hole in the fence. My nerves and the alcohol made it difficult to remember where the hole was. I reached the fence first, with my friends close behind, and they panicked when they saw me searching aimlessly for Poon. Just when I was ready to give up, Rick pointed ahead, and we bounded for it. As I helped Chester through, we heard a tree branch snap behind us. They were closing in. We kept running through the woods back to my backyard, finally relieved to make it home. Hassan called the police. We told them what happened, and they said they'd send a squad car to my house immediately. I knew I might get in trouble for trespassing, but I didn't care at that. The police searched my property, and my stomach dropped when they actually found something, a set of muddy footprints that led to my backyard fence. I told them they weren't ours, and they asked if I was sure. I said, "Why would I jump my own backyard fence?" Luckily, they didn't find anyone hiding on my property and left, saying they'd keep me updated. Surprisingly, they did. A few days later, they fished out 3 bodies from the reservoir, which wasn't a surprise. It was a huge news story for a while. My parents and I were terrified for a long time, knowing that some criminals knew where we lived. For months after, my mom swore she saw people in the woods at night, and even claimed to have seen a camera flash one night. This incident was one of the main reasons we moved out of that house. Fast forward to today, and as far as I know, police never found any connections or made arrests. The reason I'm writing this now is because I recently stumbled upon a news article about a teenager drowning in that reservoir. Brought all these memories back. That place is definitely cursed. And I still wonder about all the tragedies that might have happened there, unknown to anyone. I'm not going to call myself an expert hiker, but I've been avidly enjoying the activity for a few decades. I've traversed all the major trails in America and have been to over 75% of this beautiful country's national park. As such, I've had to find new ways to excite myself. I recently picked up a new hobby, scouring Google Maps for vast, unnamed forests and just exploring them. It's a little unconventional, but I think the added excitement is worth the risk of getting lost, or at least I used to. I carry a pack of homemade route marking stickers that I periodically slap onto trees so I don't forget my way back. As I pass each one, I pull them off the trees so as not to leave any litter behind. I'm surprised more people haven't picked up on this trick. It makes getting lost in a forest nearly impossible. Anyway, there was a slightly more daunting task ahead of me this time around. I had decided to explore Dudleytown Forest in Connecticut, which I'm sure would give any normal person pause. If you don't know, the whole town has been abandoned since the 1800s, and there are all sorts of creepy accounts about strange things happening there. You should do some research on the place if you're into that sort. I'm not, though. I'm not superstitious, and I don't believe in ghost stories. Technically, this forest is off limits to the public, but that hasn't stopped me before. As I saw it, I was basically guaranteed not to encounter anyone in those woods, which is usually what I go for. Plus, I'm from New England, so the drive wasn't so bad. I entered the woods around noon to ensure that the sun didn't go down before I finished hiking. My first impression of the woods was honestly pretty freaky. I had heard that it was dead silent in there, and I was surprised to discover that it actually was. You don't really notice or appreciate all the sounds in a forest until they aren't there anymore. Imagine closing your eyes in a silent room and only hearing your breathing. That's what it was like. To be completely honest, this silence wasn't foreign to me. I had been in forests void of animals before. Kept walking, placing my stickers as I went, trying to shake the eerie feeling the forest was inducing. I kept thinking I would eventually stumble upon an animal or some sign of life. I had no such luck. After a while, I was honestly hoping to encounter a person. That's how unsettled I was. Pretty soon, though, the silence stopped bothering me as much. For the first time since I'd stepped foot in those woods, I was calm. That feeling didn't last long, though. Out of nowhere, I picked up on a sound that sent the uneasiness rushing back in. It was like a wailing, moaning sound. Kind of sound you'd imagine a wounded animal making. That's the best way I can describe it. Even to this day, I have trouble explaining it. It was especially creepy since it was the only sound in the entire forest. I paused and listened, trying to figure out what it could be. I had never heard anything like it before. There was a chance it could have been wind whistling. There wasn't any wind. That didn't make sense. I concluded that it was most likely a wounded animal, even though deep down I knew it probably wasn't. I walked away from the sound until it faded. You're probably wondering why I didn't just turn around and leave right then. I wish I had an answer to that. I told myself that if one more creepy thing happened, that would be it for me. As I walked, I started thinking, how would an animal even get wounded in a forest like this? Was someone hunting here? There was no way I could have missed a gunshot. Maybe the hunter had taken a shot before I got there. Maybe they neglected to put the animal out of its misery. Would someone really do that? All these thoughts and more were bouncing around in my head when I stumbled upon something on the tree directly in front of me. Honest-to-God carving. I know it sounds cliché, but I'm dead serious. Carvings were in symbols, and they didn't look like letters, just random slashes and missing tree bark. I started looking around and saw that several neighboring trees were covered in the same mark. That was it for me. I turned around without another thought and began walking back, unsticking my trail markers as I passed. I'm a curious person by nature. Even I was thinking, screw this. I followed my trail markers for a while before seeing something I hadn't seen before. There was what looked like a bear's den up ahead, or at least a cave of some sort. I stopped, confused. I know myself. There was a 0% chance I would have overlooked something like a bear's den. Then it hit me. My trail markers should have been shoulder high, not waist high. My blood ran cold. I turned around and began sprinting back the way I had come, constantly looking over my shoulder. How could I have been so absent-minded? Someone had moved my stickers to lure me into that cave. But how? Was it really possible that someone had been tracking me this whole time? I didn't have time to think it through. I was too busy focusing on getting the hell out of that forest. The issue, though, was that I had no idea where I was going without those trail markers. I kept running, not even trying to be quiet. Would have been pointless anyway. Forest was dead silent, apart from the sounds I was making. I stopped to catch my breath and pulled out my phone, praying for a signal. By some miracle, I had a bar. I quickly found my parked car's location on the map and figured out which direction to go. I wasn't far. Then, just like that, the signal dropped. But it didn't matter. I knew where I was headed now. That's when the wailing started up again. Twice as loud as before. I ran faster than I had ever run in my life. Even though my most fit years were behind me, the sound seemed to be coming from right behind me. Every time I turned to look, couldn't see anything. After what felt like the worst 10 minutes of my life, I finally reached the edge of the forest, and the wailing stopped abruptly. I jumped in my car and sped off, before whatever was chasing me had a chance to catch up. That day ruined hiking. Here's my rational explanation for what happened. Some hermit or woods freak lives in those woods and noticed me before I noticed him. He tracked me and messed with my trail marks, hoping to lure me toward that cave. I'm assuming he had a whistle or something to make that wailing noise, which is why it stopped so abruptly when he realized he wasn't going to catch me. I know there are holes in this explanation. Like, how could someone blow through a whistle for that long while simultaneously running at full speed? I'm open to any suggestions or explanation. Maybe there's a reason that forest is off limits to civilians.